Okay, all right, everyone. It is 3:45, so we're starting to record. Uh, as everyone can see and hear, I'm not Michael. I'm Julianne Oden. I'm the Delissa social director. And since Michael is out of town, I will be conducting this week's webinar with Christy Oquera of the Great Neck Library, who's going to be talking to us about programs and services for veterans. If anyone has any questions at any time, feel free to type them into the chat and I will go ahead and read them out at the end. But unless there's anything else, I can start. So take it away, Christy.
Okay, thanks and welcome everybody. Thanks for stopping in this afternoon. Today's discussion will be program planning, some tips and ideas, a little toolkit chat about how I coordinated with another librarian over a simple water cooler idea, how we grew it into a resource fair for veterans. So a little bit about who I am. I am a veteran, Navy veteran, and I always had some idea of how I could incorporate veterans into the services from the public library and just brainstorming with people in the library about how we could make that happen or what even we could possibly do. Presently a reference librarian and an archivist, local history custodian at Great Neck Library. And I'm also, I wear a hat over at LIU where I'm the archivist and digitization lab manager for the Gardner Foundation grant that LIU works on. I'm pretty new to library world, so I feel like I brought a lot with me as far as different ideas of how to do things differently than maybe some traditional library ways, and some of the traditional librarians we're used to, which I think is a good thing. You can bring that with you from experience from the outside. It just, I think it makes it better. So today we'll talk about how I created a program from just like I mentioned, a basic conversation with a librarian, Justin Crossfox, who is the library manager also at Great Neck. And he said, well, what kind of ideas do you have? What kind of issues or things could we maybe bring to this Parkville branch? Parkville and Great Neck is a very sleepy location, and he was looking for a little bit of excitement, something new, something that maybe they've never tried before. And so I suggested, I said, well, I personally have some ideas that involve veterans. And he said, we've never done anything like that before. So we just kind of talked about it for a couple of months. I think we started discussing the idea in February, and we really didn't even put hands to the idea until April. So, and then as we started to create this program, we realized that everything that we were doing and talking about could apply to really any kind of program. Veterans were the demographic that we chose for this, but it really, everything that we did could easily be applied to seniors or children or an illness related issue or even religion or there are numerous different things that you could apply a resource fair to. And so why we did what we did then, so we started to talk about the issues of, well, who are we serving with this kind of program and what do we expect to accomplish with it? And so like I mentioned, the Parkville branch in Great Neck is pretty sleepy, and it's there's not a lot happening there, and we wanted to find a way to engage the community. And we thought if we could have some kind of resource fair for veterans, that would draw in the veteran, not only the veterans, but their families, their caretakers, their spouses, their children, their grandchildren even, and we did accomplish that with that program. Also, I say here to serve an unserved population, and what I mean by that is Nassau County hosts an event twice a year, once in Hempstead and once in Freeport, and it's aimed to serve high need veterans and not really veterans of a middle or upper class, which if you do your research about the demographics of veterans on Long Island, interestingly enough, has the highest, one of the highest populations of veterans in the county. I mean, sorry, in the whole country. And you wouldn't think that because we're not a military island anymore. We're not a military community like we used to be decades ago. But Long Island does have a high population of World War II, albeit not so many as anymore, but the Korean and the Vietnam veterans. And the numbers, I think, are well over 100,000 veterans on Long Island. So we knew that we had the population, and we were pretty sure that we would get the turnout that we were expecting. So here's a little timeline of what we did to prepare for this. Like, as I mentioned, it started as just a little chit chat in like February or March, and I didn't even expect for it to take off like it did. But then in April, we actually sat down with the calendar and picked a date and started drafting contact lists and sending out emails to people that we already knew, people that we are already in contact with, and started gathering a contact list in an Excel spreadsheet, very basic. And so then as we got closer to the date, of course, it got a little bit more faster paced and a lot more things left to do with it. But we just started talking to people and networking, and one contact led to another contact, and friends of one contact, one vendor mentioned it to another friend, and then we had vendors calling us and asking us for tables. So word of mouth helped a lot with that. I'll share a little bit later. Then also we went around a month ahead of time and asked for local vendors to participate and help and donate refreshments, and that I'll mention a little later also. We probably should have done that a little bit sooner rather than a month out, just to make contact with the local vendors and tell them what we were doing, and then have a go-to contact for the day, the big day that in November. So one of our concerns, again, Parkville branch is a very small location, so it's leftover rooms of an old school building that the school district doesn't use anymore. So that's what they're working with over there at Parkville. And so we knew that we couldn't have a Coliseum type event where we had unlimited vendors and unlimited tables and space for thousands of people to come through. So we figured out how many tables do we have, how many chairs do we have, could we get extra tables and chairs in here if we needed to, what's the best traffic flow for the room that we were allotted, and of course all of that then taking into consideration the handicap accessibility. That far door in the center of the picture to the center left leads to stairs, which is not handicap accessible. And so we realized that anybody who was coming in a wheelchair, because that would be typical for a veteran population, that you would have some handicap patrons coming in, they would have to park in a parking lot and then make their way to our front door, which is where the ramp is, and then all the way back to the back of the building where this room is situated. So we had to take those things into consideration, and then also keeping the traffic flow clear between the tables. Was it enough room for at least a wheelchair and plus one, so people could maneuver back and forth through the vendor tables? And then, of course, we didn't want it to be boring old, say nothing about celebrating our veterans and talking about what we were trying to accomplish for the day. So we had balloons hung from the ceiling. We had streamers, red, white, and blue flag theme, of course. And then we had some posters done up by our marketing team. And just little tiny things that kind of said, today's your day, veterans. We're celebrating you. Welcome to our library. And, just to make them feel a little bit at home and that everything about that day was special to them. We had some of our clerks pull different resources from our library. We had them pull movies and books and other things that were military related and celebrating the military, because we knew that we wanted to promote other things that were happening in our library at the same time. So in addition to pulling the materials for display, we had flyers prepared for other events that were happening in our library, and we had extra newsletters and programming material available, because we figured if that was our one chance to get these people in the door that day, they might be there to see what else the library is doing for them or what else the library is doing in general. So we figured that if that was our only one shot to reach out and promote our other programming, we wanted to have all that stuff ready to go for them. And so a little bit of interesting about who we invited and who actually showed up. We invited, I think, more than 300 vendors. I have a list of everybody that I've ever worked with in the military locally, and then even some vendors who were nationally located. And Justin had a list of people that he also reached out to. And so out of about, I would say, 200 or 300 emails that we sent out to different vendors, we ended up with 30 local. Most of them were local. But this is one example. We reached out to the Military Exchange because I knew that they had launched a program that was going to go into effect that Veterans Day. And they weren't having a hard time reaching veterans, but it's hard to reach veterans who have not shopped or who were never allowed to shop at the Military Exchange before. So they were launching this new program to allow all veterans to shop their online store. And they were looking for a way to promote it and get it out to as many people as possible ahead of Veterans Day. So it wasn't even that we were begging for we were begging for vendors to come. They actually needed us, and this was a good way for them to reach as many people as possible. And I believe they brought these go bags, these swag bags for new veterans to promote their program, and they were out of them before we finished our resource fair that day. So it actually worked out really well for them. Some more interesting people who did show up, and none of them were technically military related. It wasn't a room full of military people at all. It was a room full of local organizations. And here we had 3 local colleges and universities come out and represent their colleges that they, because all of the colleges, and I'm sure St. John's also has this, I've heard of St. John's program for the veterans. They're building, they're really getting a solid foundation for college students who are veterans, and their needs are a little bit different. So the colleges and universities put a lot of time and money into building these programs for veterans. And so 3 colleges came out to participate in this. This one's a little bit morbid maybe, but it's extremely relevant. We called the local funeral home and we said, I personally know that many veterans and their families don't know that they have specific burial rights, and some veterans are under the impression that their when they die, that the government is going to come in and take care of them, their burial rights and procedures and all of the arrangements, and that's not the case. So he came to dispel some of the myths and rumors about burial rights, and to let people know that there really still are costs associated with what veterans think are their free benefits. We had Hofstra students stop by because the following day they were hosting a legal clinic, and I believe they host this twice a year, and it's also gained a lot of popularity. They have a wait list now for their legal assistance program at Hofstra, and so they came out to let veterans know they're there and please make an appointment and stop by and use their clinic and spread the word. We had members from the local military organizations, the VFW, the American Legion. There are other smaller organizations, AMVETS and Fleet Reserve Association, who also sent membership material because most of these organizations are dwindling and dying and closing their doors. And so they're always looking for new members and to get the word out, and fundraising assistance, and not just of military veterans, but also of their families and spouses who are eligible to join their booster associations, like the Ladies Auxiliary or the family auxiliaries of these organizations. We did consider adding a table for the recruiters because veterans usually bring their children and bring their grandchildren who are also very interested sometimes in joining the military. And so we thought that a recruiter might be a good choice, but they weren't able to attend. They were interested, but they weren't able to attend. So we had their brochures and their business cards available for people to grab and pick up along the way. Also, some veterans are still eligible to return to service, and that was another thing that we tried to do, is to get the officers candidates recruiters in, because some veterans who have even been out for of the service for more than 20 years can return to service, and a lot of them don't know that they could be adding to their retirement status by returning to service. Again, local businesses, we had life insurance agents and bankers, and this guy, he heard word of mouth through somebody else, and he actually called us and asked us for a table, and that he was interested in speaking with local veterans. So lesson learned here, we started collecting all of the contact information from these people and building our Rolodex. I don't know if anybody uses Rolodex anymore, but saving the contacts, because I feel like all of these people are going to be of some resource to us at a future date, whether we redo this program or we do a similar program. A lot of these people, I think, will be good contacts for other things that we're going to do in the future. Again, another organization stopped by, has really nothing to do. They're firemen here on Long Island, and their mission for their nonprofit that they've created is to help wounded soldiers. And their mission is similar to Wounded Warrior, but it's on a local level here, and you could see the money going to work, and you could see all of their volunteer work going back into the community. So we like this organization here very much. This is Nassau County Firefighters Operation Wounded Warriors. This, again, he is actually from the VA here on Long Island and ended up being our most popular vendor. The vendors who were in attendance all wanted to speak to him, as well as all of the veterans who stopped by, because he was their direct conduit to the VA out in Northport. So a very popular guy, and of course a no-brainer for having somebody like that at the Veterans Resource Fair. And a lot of smaller organizations have begun forming on Long Island for peer-to-peer service, for mental health service. We've got a lady here. She began a women's service for military veterans, and she hosts events all year long. She also works at the county. The county has a liaison office for veterans, so you can have somebody go into bat for you directly if you having to deal with the VA, which can be a little bit overwhelming and intimidating for some veterans. And of the dozens of yeses, we had some cancellations at the last minute, and we had some people say, we can't attend, we're down in Virginia or we're out in Texas, but we like what you're doing and we want to send brochures and literature for you. Would you put it out on a table for us? And of course, everybody loves a giveaway. Everybody loves, you know, the free stuff that you, the pens, the pencils, the notepads. So we set up a table for all of those things to be people to go and just pick up the stuff as they needed. And one thing we did think about this ahead of time, and I knew with 30 people all handing you literature at the same time, of course, if somebody was going to drop a notebook stack of papers at some point. So we dug around and got enough of our tote bags to use, because we figured it's all this paper and stuff and giveaways, and so we wanted people to have something to put it in. We used the library's own branded tote bags. And that's really essential for something like this, like a resource fair where people are walking through and grabbing it, just they don't have time to read it or they don't bring a bag of their own. So good to have tote bags, and probably a good idea to have something that represents your own organization. And so as a veteran, I know that there is no way that any veteran is coming out for any occasion unless there's food. And this is a tried and true thing. We host events every single month at our local VFW and in our American Legion. And if there is no food, nobody's coming. So I knew that we would definitely need to have some snacks, and not a full course dinner, of course, but if there's something to snack on and nosh along the way, veterans will show up. It's almost a give me. So we contacted some of the local shops, and of course, then as a thank you and a repayment, we wanted to make sure that they had the publicity, as you know, and let the people walking through know, hey, this was all donated by your local shops, and so pay it forward when you go into that ShopRite store or you go into that Dunkin' Donuts. Mention it to them. Say, hey, you know, thanks for the coffee. Thanks for the donated snacks. We saw that you donated to the resource fair at the library. And it's just good PR. It's good for them. It's good for you. And it's a feel-good thing. Everybody wins. So here, these were some of the other people that we did contact that weren't able to attend. And again, we were trying to think outside the box. So what other things, who else would we invite that was really, some of them were way outside the box. And I had to explain to Justin how or why that vendor would be appealing to somebody coming in that was looking for veteran services. And he had some other great ideas too, where he said, hey, what about the local fire department? And I said, oh, you know what, you're right. So we reached out to them. What about the local police department? You're right. Even if it's not for the 90-year-old veteran who's coming through, he's got children, he's got grandchildren. All of those are recruitable candidates for these organizations. And there is a undeniable bond between these kinds of organizations, the fire departments, the police departments. So it was a good fit. We did reach out to them. but we didn't get as many of the local organizations and businesses as we thought we would. And I'll get to that in just a minute. Of course, the local newspaper, the military newspapers. The military newspapers was an interesting one because we really thought that they were going to be on board and they were going to jump at the chance to send us copies of their last edition, and they weren't actually. They wanted us to purchase them. They did not want to send samples or, which I understand. You know, they're a small organization and their subscription base is very small. I was a little bit surprised about that one, that we reached out to them and asked them for copies and they weren't able to or weren't willing to send that stuff out to us. The county clerk's office was another one that surprised me because I feel like the county jumps at the chance to participate and get in on things like this. And we really had a hard time dragging them to the well for this. And I don't know, we did reach out to them early and often, but we couldn't get them to participate. Some of these other ones, very big organizations we reached out to, and in addition to very small organizations. Some of the organizations also did not want to participate with us because it was our first time doing this. They wanted to see the results. They wanted to see numbers and statistics. They wanted us to prove what kind of traffic we could draw from this the initial one. And then they said that they would be interested in participating in a second one. So we have some numbers for them for the next time that we decide to do this. And unfortunately, our branch is going into renovation soon, so we postponed and we're not going to run one this year. We're going to try it again next year when we're back up and running full speed at that branch. What didn't work? We tried to do it too close to Veterans Day, and I should have known better for that. We tried to do it a week ahead of Veterans Day, but that was bumping up and conflicting with a lot of other events that were happening that week and the week after. So I think next time, if we did that, we would try something a month earlier or a month later. We had some parking confusion, and we really wanted to get solid statistics for head count, and we didn't. We weren't able to do that. So I think next time we're going to have some kind of sign-in sheet or pre-registration. Some other obstacles real quick. I mentioned local businesses weren't too excited to come out on the weekend. They were either short-staffed or they didn't have anybody. They weren't willing to pay somebody off schedule to come out on a Saturday, and which made sense. And maybe with a little more lead time, we could get them to do that next time. And so, as I mentioned, the donors love they love what they're doing. They're happy to donate, but it's nice if you give back to them and add them into the press release, anything that you send out to the media or the press, let them know, follow up with a thank you letter. Just let them know that their help was appreciated. They love it, and we appreciate what they do for that. We had a couple people say mostly that our parking and our signage was a problem, and we agreed. We could have probably done a better job with it, and we will next time. But it was important. We asked for feedback from the vendors and the patrons, and we got some positives and we got some good criticism that we'll put into effect next time. As I mentioned, maybe we'll create the sign-in sheet so we've got a good solid pre-registration for everybody who's attending. And of course, we didn't do as good of a job as we probably could have in getting our teen club to make thank you cards, posters, banners, bracelets, and stuff like that, and putting the teens to work for community service credits. We could have done that. We didn't, and we will. And also, what politician doesn't love a good photo op? We should have invited all of the local officials. We were a little conflicted with it because some veterans don't want the local officials there. They want to keep it, good and unbiased and politics free. and others don't mind the politicians stopping by. And of course, the politicians always love to stop by. So we would probably consider inviting them next time. And just a couple of ideas here, things to consider, of course, ample parking, handicap accessibility, and really just get started early. Like I said, we started talking about this in February and we pulled it off in November, which I thought was a lot of time, but we really could have started talking about it many months sooner than that to get a better turnout. Of course, consider your seating and guest seating, and then something else we did real quick at the end, we gathered up literature from all of the vendors who had attended, because I had a feeling that somebody would say, I wasn't able to attend, or did you get the phone number of that guy? Because I lost his business card. So we made go bags at the end of the resource fair. And we had about 5 or 10 bags ready to go. And those ended up disappearing throughout the week. We left them out for anybody to take, and people did come in and take advantage of those gathered resources. And that's my spiel for today. I'll take any questions if anybody has anything, or you can take my email and phone number here and reach out to me privately.
Yeah, thank you, Christy. That was a great presentation, really informative. If anyone in the room has any questions, give a moment to type them in.
So Justin and I, it's kind of a half joking, he asked, would you be interested in presenting our guidelines and steps we took at one of the library conferences? And I said, yeah, sure, let's give it a try. So he sent off some proposals to a couple of the local conferences, and we were denied. And then he called me up one day and he said, what do you think about Alaska? And I laughed and I said, are you kidding me? That's crazy. And so I said, you know what? Send off our proposal to Alaska. They're never going to approve it, but send it anyway. So he sent it, and we got a reply back from Alaska State Library Conference, and they asked us to come out and present, and we did, and it was amazing. Probably the story of my whole library career, really, is to fly out to Alaska and present on a little resource fair that we did all the way on the other side of the country.
That's great. Very good. I see that nobody has any questions. I have a question. It seems like you learned a lot about how to conduct this sort of resource fair and other information that would be useful for your programming. Did you see any other benefits in other areas of the library? I know you talked about placing out different books and DVDs and stuff like that. Did you see any noticeable increase in usage, or were you able to apply any of the lessons you learned to any other service areas in the library?
I think that this was the first time that we had really made contact with the veteran community, and it wasn't a very something that you would think of for, I don't know if anybody really knows the Great Neck demographic, but you wouldn't associate it with veterans at all. It's probably the least likely community you would associate with veterans. So we did learn that they're there and they have needs, and there were other requests for other services such as resume assistance. Justin and I had talked about this a little bit more, because yes, there's a huge need there for veterans to have their resumes rewritten, but it's not a sustainable program. It would be like a one-time deal, because once you've revised and helped them reword their military resume into terms that civilians can understand, it's kind of a one-time deal. So it wouldn't be a sustainable program. It would be maybe a workshop or something to get everybody in the room together and then help them reword and kind of soften that military jargon so that civilians can understand what they did for the last 10 or 15 years in the military. So resume building. And then we also did had two other ideas spin off from that. We found out that East Meadow Library hosts an art show that is, the art is done by veterans. And that's a really popular program. We didn't know about it before ahead of time. And of course, Great Neck has plenty of gallery space. So that's something that we considered also, either partnering with East Meadow or starting our own project from that. And just through talking about what we did as this resource fair, we found out that there's a library, I think it is Southampton Library out in Suffolk. I'm not exactly positive about that, but they're collecting oral histories of veterans and sending those off to the Library of Congress. So just this has kind of opened up the conversation with other librarians as to either what they're doing or give them for us to piggyback off of some of the things that they're doing, or to teach them what we're doing and give them a jump off point to be able to serve veterans in their own community.
Great, thank you so much. I don't think there's any other questions, so thank you again, Christy, for this really informative presentation. It gives us a lot to consider in terms of general programming considerations and also specifically veterans needs. I'll point out for the other DLIS students on the call that our next webinar will be in 2 weeks on October 17th, and I will be talking about the e-portfolio. And then there will be another webinar on Halloween on October 31st. I think the topic is to be determined, but we will have more information on that as we get closer. So I just want to thank you again, Christy, for coming and giving this wonderful presentation. And
thanks for having me.
we'll sign off.
All right. Take care, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.